What's up everyone, welcome to another video. So far, we were able to build a user profile, and we also provided a way for our users to log out of the app. Today, we'll be handling call logs locally in Flutter. In the previous video, I urged everyone to participate in the poll I had created, and to help me choose the database for storing data locally. Turns out the margin was very close, given the number of people who participated. And there were many valid points put out by many of the viewers in support of Hive. So I'll be implementing local data storage with both Sqlite as well as Hive. Although this video is just gonna lay some foundation for what's coming. So we'll be creating some important files and I'll try to explain everything in a beginner friendly way. And in the next one, we'll start by implementing Sqlite database. So let's get started. First, head over to the pubspec.yaml file and add a comment local storage. Then just add Sqlite plugin with version 1.3.0. Also, let's just save us some time and import Hive as well. For Hive, the version that I'm going for is 1.4.1 plus 1. Alright, let's sync it. Once everything is synced, I'll start by creating a new model. So just head over to the models folder and create a class called log. Now let's think about the properties that a log should have. Here we are basically supposed to define the log model considering the details that we'll want to store in our DB. First, we need every log to have a unique identifier, so I'll write int log ID. Then we'll want to store a caller's name, caller's pic, and we also need to know about the receiver's name and their profile picture. After that, we need to know the call status and a timestamp value of type string. This timestamp value basically holds the time at which the call was made. We could have used a date time as well, but Sqlite only supports primitive data type and using a string is just less complex. Let's quickly initialize all these properties inside of the class constructor. After that, I'll create a function called toMap which takes an object of log class as an argument and converts it into a map variable. And as always, I'll create a named constructor called fromMap which basically converts a variable of type map to a variable of type log. Now, before getting into the main code, let me just define some helper functions. In fact, just one to be precise. Just go over to the utils file and start by writing static string format date string. Then this will accept a string variable called a date string. After that, we'll parse out a date time from this date string with the help of the datetime.parse method and format this datetime according to our needs. So in my case, I want the datetime to be in dd/mm/yy format. So I'll create a variable formatter and set it to date format and pass the sort of format that we want. Finally, I'll simply return formatter.format datetime. Although there's an error, and in order to resolve this error, we will need to import another plugin called intl. So I'll head over to the pubspec file and do just that. Once you sync the project, this error should be gone. Let's go over to the resources folder and create a new folder called localdb. And inside of this, we'll create 3 more folders. I'll call the first one db, second one interface, and the third one will be called repository. So we are basically trying to implement and structure all this in such a way that your UI neither knows nor cares about the database. In object-oriented terms, this is what's known as data abstraction. It should not matter to the UI whether the data is being fetched from an Sqlite database or any other database. It will only call the basic methods like get logs, delete logs, and so on. And it is the job of the repository to select the correct database and get the task done from whichever DB we prefer. Then the DB folder will essentially contain all of our databases. Therefore, I'll create 2 new files, namely hive methods.dart and Sqlite methods.dart. Then there is repository, which will decide which database is to be used. So I'll create a new file called log repository. And finally, the interface, which will be implemented by all of these files. Let's start by creating the interface. So right over here, I'll create a new file and call it loginterface.dart. This will be an abstract class, so I'll write abstract class log interface. This will have 5 different functions. The first one will be init, second one will be add logs, which takes log class object as an argument. Then there is get logs. If we want, we can explicitly specify the return type for this function as well, so as to prevent any future confusion. For the return type of get logs, I'll write future of type list of type log. So basically, if we await for the get logs method, we'll be returned with a list of logs. After that, there's going to be another method which takes log ID as a parameter, and then there is close. This interface is our blueprint, and all the other files or the other classes will basically contain all the same methods but with different definitions. Let's head over to the Hive methods file, and in here I'll write class Hive methods implements log interface. You can see that a red squiggly line appears just below the class name. This basically tells us that we need to override the 5 basic methods, and that is essentially why we needed an interface, so that we can force those methods on these classes. So just tap on this bulb and select create 5 missing overrides. I'll do the same thing with Sqlite methods file as well. So I'll head over to that file and create a class called Sqlite methods and implement log interface. Then we'll simply override all the methods. Finally, let's come over to the log repository file. Let's create the log repository class. Now this is the class which will decide what database are we going to use. So I'll create a static variable of dynamic type and call it db object. Then I'll create another static variable of type bool and name it is hive. Earlier I implemented the same log interface on this class as well, and the class looked something like this. You can see that we are initializing the isHive value through the constructor, and based on that value we are initializing the db object. My approach worked well, but there's a shortcoming or a sort of limitation to this approach. In this case, we had to specify the database that we are using on every object creation. So every time we refer to the log repository class, we had to specify whether we'll be using Hive or Sqlite. Due to this, a practical implementation was not possible. Plus, it also made switching between the two databases quite difficult. Suppose if you call this repository class object in more than 50 files and set isHive to true in all of them, then you had to make changes in each one of those 50 files while switching the database. Therefore, I scrapped off that approach and decided to make everything static. I'll start by creating a static method called init, which takes a named parameter of boolean type called isHive. And in its definition, I'll simply write dbObject equals to, and if isHive happens to be true, then we'll initialize the dbObject to Hive methods, or else we'll set it to Sqlite methods. Finally, I'll call dbObject.init. Similarly, I'll define add logs, which takes an object of log class as a parameter and returns dbObject.addLogs. We'll define another method for deleting the logs. Delete logs will take ID of the log which is to be deleted and return dbObject.deleteLogs. And we'll pass the log ID further to this delete log function. Then we'll define getLogs and close method in a similar manner. Now you might be able to fully understand why we did everything we did. So you can see that if isHive is true, then this repository will automatically call the init, addLogs, deleteLogs and all those methods from Hive methods file. Or else it will call the same methods from a Sqlite methods file. So let me show you a quick demo. But first, let's create and organize some files. So far in the page views folder, we have a widgets folder and one file. Now in order to prevent any confusion, it would be better if we place everything inside the dedicated folders. For chats, I'll create a folder named chats and just move the widgets and chat list screen inside of it. That will cause a few problems which can be solved very quickly. Now I'll create another folder called logs, which will contain widgets specific to logs screen. We'll also need a file called log_screen.art. Now this file will contain the UI for the log screen. But for now, I'll just quickly create a stateless widget, call it log_screen, return a scaffold, set the color of the scaffold to universal variables.blackcolor. You don't need to pass an app bar for now. And for body, I'll write center, child, flat button, child, text, click me and write onPressed. I'll come inside of the onPressed method and write logs repository.init. Since the init function is a static method, therefore we did not have to create any object for the log repository class. We were able to directly access it with the help of the class name. But here it shows a warning line because we have not passed the required parameter. So I'll set isHive to true. Let's also call another method. So I'll write log repository.addLogs and pass an empty log object. Since we'll not be making use of that log object or the log argument, therefore you can just pass it without a second thought. Now, since we have set isHive to true, therefore log repository would automatically call the init method and addLogs method from the Hive methods file. In order to verify that, I'll head over to Hive methods, and inside the init method, I'll write print initialized Hive database, and inside the addLogs method, I'll write adding values to HiveDB. Similarly, I'll come inside of the Sqlite methods file, and inside the init method, I'll write initialized Sqlite DB. Then for the addLogs method of this file, I'll write adding values to Sqlite DB. One last step is to tell the page view widget that we have created a new screen. So just head over to the home screen widget, and right below the chat list screen, I'll write log screen. Alright, let's test this. So I've launched the app, and now I can go to the logs tab. And on tapping this button, notice that on the terminal, it prints exactly what we expected. Initialized Hive and adding values to Hive database. Also, if I set this isHive value to false and hot restart the app, then tap on this button, there we go. Now it says initialized Sqlite DB and adding logs to Sqlite database. Alright, that's it for this video. All the changes to the code can be found in the GitHub repository linked below. As I mentioned in the beginning, this video was just to lay out some foundation. And in the next one, we'll define the methods present inside the Sqlite method file. I hope you learned something new from this video. If you did, then like this video or comment your feedbacks. Also, if you're new, then don't forget to subscribe, as I'm planning to post more and more polls and let the viewers decide what would they want to see. So subscribe if you don't want to miss any of them. Alright, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.